Among the many issues facing children's librarians today is that of the use of volunteers. How can we, as librarians, discover how volunteers can best be used in children's departments, or even if they should be used at all? Opinions from literature and children's librarians vary widely on this controversial subject. Today, we seek to explore this issue by examining several aspects of volunteerism in the children's library, such as, should we use volunteers at all? Recruitment and placement of volunteers, volunteer training, problem volunteers, and evaluation of volunteers. So, should we use volunteers at all? Many librarians feel that volunteers are more trouble than they're worth. Librarians have cited volunteers as unreliable, unskilled, self-centered, and constantly causing conflicts with staff. Employees complain of the extra time and efforts that it takes to recruit, train, and manage volunteers. Still others are concerned with the threat that volunteers provide to their paid positions. Another concern is security and the protection of privacy for patrons. There is a fear that volunteers are unreliable at following a work schedule. Many worry that volunteers can't be held as accountable as librarians and staff can be for their work. And unfortunately, some of the horror stories that have been told about volunteers are true. All of these concerns are extremely valid. However, we feel that not only can these obstacles be overcome, but the reasons for including volunteers in the library overwhelmingly tip the scale in favor of their inclusion. So what reasons do we have to include volunteers? Well, first and foremost, we need help. Many libraries cannot meet their goals for children's service with only the budget and staffing that they have, especially in today's economy. And volunteers are an extra supplement that can push the children's department to success. After all, when staffing and budgets are cut, those in the children's department are often asked to put aside tasks such as storytelling and program planning in order to provide the clerical support that libraries must have to operate. Here is where volunteers can step in. Even without an abundance of special skills, even the youngest volunteers in the children's department can shelve books and maintain the welcoming and clean appearance of the department. More skilled volunteers can do even more, like help carry out programs and storytelling for children and young adults. Having people to help support, create, and perform these programs without draining the budget seems to be crucial in a time when resources are scarce. And don't forget about the new and fresh perspective that volunteers can bring to the library. They don't have preconceived and standard notions about the library and can help to provide perspectives that librarians might not be able to develop. Many volunteers will have different problem-solving techniques and are willing to experiment with new ideas, services, and projects. But what about the concerns mentioned earlier? Well, let's be realistic. These are valid concerns. However, volunteers should never replace paid employees. Because if the volunteer left, the level of library service offered shouldn't be subject to decline. Volunteers are supplements, not replacements. Think about it. How many children's or young adults departments actually have all the paid staff that they need? Even if the department seems to be running smoothly, the work can be made much more manageable and beneficial to our patrons with the addition of volunteers. What about volunteer accountability? Well, the volunteer can't be treated as a staff member. There is no paycheck motivation, and librarians must be careful not to treat volunteers as if their service and time is not valued. However, with proper training and management, as well as a detailed list of volunteer expectations, you will find that the performance standards of most volunteers will be more than adequate, and there will hopefully be no need to hold volunteers accountable for mistakes. And what about those librarians that maintain that volunteers are simply more trouble than they're worth? Well, it is true that recruiting, supervising, and training volunteers takes time and effort. But the expenditure of this time and effort, even if it means hiring a staff member within the children's department solely devoted to the management of volunteers, is well worth it. When managed correctly, volunteers can lighten the heavy workload of staff members and add hundreds of hours of quality work towards basic clerical support, expand support for children and young adult programs, and offer fresh perspectives. We say that it's well worth it. Now that we've convinced you of the benefits of using volunteers within a children's department, let's talk about volunteer recruitment and placement. First and foremost, you, as the volunteer manager of the children's department, should have a clear idea of what you want from your volunteers. Do you want your volunteers for simple work such as shelving and department maintenance, or use them for more hefty tasks, such as to serve as program coordinators or storytellers? Develop specific written job descriptions to share with potential volunteers so that these volunteers will know exactly what is expected of them in their new roles. In your interview with a volunteer, determine their skills and what appeals to them, and designate the volunteer to a specific role. If the volunteer is giving a clear description of what their tasks will be, that is personally suited to them, there will be less potential problems in the future for both the supervisor and the volunteer. But wait, how do we get these volunteers into the library in the first place? Well, there are a number of ways to bring in volunteers to help serve the children's department. The easiest is the walk-in, or people who simply inquire at the circulation desk for volunteer opportunities. Other easy ways to recruit volunteers is by having a box that patrons can check while filling out a library card application, then contacting interested patrons by phone or email. The Teen Advisory Board is another great place to find volunteers. Members on the board can volunteer their time or encourage their friends from school to volunteer. Since the teens already have a vested interest in the success of the library, they are more likely to work hard as volunteers in the department. Opportunities and needs can also be listed on the front page of the library website or on the children's page. However, sometimes it takes a little more effort on your part to bring in volunteers. Network. Ask current staff members and volunteers to spread the word to everyone they know, friends, families, and especially to young adults. A little enthusiasm on the part of existing volunteers can go a long way in motivating potential new volunteers to inquire about volunteering. Make a poster or flyers to hang up in the children's department and identifying current volunteer jobs that need to be filled. The poster should be vibrant and attention-grabbing, with specific instructions on steps that should be taken to volunteer. Summer reading programs are also a great way to find volunteers, as well as use the young volunteers that you already have. Teen volunteers can record the programs or help lead the activities and mentor the younger children. You can make public service announcements on the television, radio, and in newspapers to spread the word about volunteer opportunities. If your community has a volunteer referral organization, use it. Many places have nonprofit groups that refer volunteer-seeking community members to different agencies, and if the volunteer referral organization knows what type of volunteer the library is searching for, it can help to fill this role. Finally, take advantage of volunteer fairs in your community. These are frequently held on a semi-annual or annual basis, and attending to distribute flyers and information on volunteering within the children's department could bring in a plethora of skilled new volunteers.